wait for anything, and the vibration in my jaw suppressed any real rumination. Quite possibly, in the midst of a chemical lobotomy, my only definite thought was, it feels so good to lie down. And that's when I knew that I needed a staircase. A filling appointment is not supposed to be the most tranquil part of the day. So I resolved that as soon as I left the chair, I'd start studying meditation or mindful living or eating flax seeds or whatever it took to die fucked up. I'd resisted the staircase method in the past because it seemed so new agey. People who put themselves to sleep by envisioning their descent down a mental staircase are people who confer great agency to crystals. They're people who read books about spiritual healing, whose covers feature pastel drawings of books on fairies and prayer. Yet, here I am, in the early hours of the morning, atop my very own flight of brain stairs. Self-hypnosis is sort of like trying to perform a card trick on yourself. The talking part of your brain must convince the rest of your brain to go to sleep, without seeming too calculated. It has to seem casual. The details of the process vary, but my narrative goes like this. You are standing at the top of a beautiful white staircase in the middle of a golden pond. You will descend the staircase into your iridescent water. With every step, you'll become relaxed and sensual at the top of your body. So it goes. Very deliberate and controlled as I effectively drown myself to sleep. And although it's nearly foolproof now, it didn't work right away. At the beginning, when I felt myself drifting off to sleep, the thrill of success would snap me back to full consciousness. Or I'd get impatient, and I'd take the steps too fast. And when the water was at my shoulders, a little voice of panic spoke over the hypnotist going, "It's not working." But before my staircase, sleep seemed binary. I was either doing it or I was not. And now I've become familiar with the gradations of consciousness. On the first step, I am impatient, hyper-aware of every itch, unhappy to be on a staircase. On the second step, I am better able to actually focus on the parts of my body that are being asked to release. Between steps 3 and 4, I find that my mind has taken a little unauthorized vacation. Just a little sweep of nonsense. Maybe in the flash of a remembered conversation or a brief visit from some imagined third party. This recognition is usually enough to fully reinstall me on the staircase, and I continue, but then, with the water at my waist, I find I have lifted my foot, but can't remember where to put it. I find that I have been standing still for what seems like a very long time. And at that point, I have only a few remaining moments of lucidity. In truth, I do not know what happens after that. Presumably, my limp body tumbles down in the slow motion of an underwater fall. I lie at the foot of the stairs for hours. The current lifts my hair. Far away, other climbers roll down their own staircases and hit the bottom in a little plume of soft dust. I remain crumpled, breathing slowly until a pair of divers arrives to lift me to the surface where another day is breaking. Perched on the dry landing above, my sparrow looks on, waiting. I'm trying my hand at fiction. I read this piece once before. It's called Fantastic. It started when I was on hold, an unusual moment for beginners. A pair of automated voices was keeping me informed of my cue position. You are caller number 2. There are 1 callers ahead of you. The primary voice was soothing and erotic, the other robotic, specializing in numbers. And I had a little daydream about a call center populated only by centerfolds and fembots. The former wrapping spiral cords around their fingers, taking calls in negligee, and the latter sitting completely erect, reciting numbers into their headsets and blinking in unison with a little shutter click. A real receptionist abruptly cut in. Hello, thank you for holding. May I ask who's calling? Disoriented by the sudden bombardment of different female voices, I answered, fantastic. The receptionist, surprised by my answer, repeated, fantastic. And I said, yes, fantastic. Now please remember that this entire exchange transpired in a course of 2 or 3 seconds. And I have relived these few moments many, many times, slowing down the reel of my memory to determine exactly what went wrong. Here is the frame-by-frame analysis. I've been lulled into a semi-stupor by long minutes on hold. When the receptionist jarred me back to attention, I answered the question that usually begins a social conversation, which is, how are you? When the receptionist then sought to confirm that she'd heard me correctly, I knee-jerked a literal answer. Yes, the word that I just said was the word fantastic. Had I been allowed even another fraction of a second, I would have bailed myself out with some quick explanation. Oh, but my name is Dessa, forgive me, hadn't had my coffee yet. And we would each produce a puff of totally fake laughter, and she'd reciprocate with some corporate quip, like hump day or what have you. And the entire combo would be corrected, but I was too slow. All right, fantastic, I'll patch you through. And I was holding again. But this hold was different. It was dark and empty. I was not making a social call. I had called Harper's Magazine about a job, an editorial position vacated only the week before. And I moved to hang up, but hesitated for a moment at the thought that Harper's might have caller ID, and then I was too slow again. Good morning, fantastic. This is Ellen Rosenbush. I understand you're calling about our arts editorial position. Ellen and I stayed on the line for 35 minutes. I have never had a better interview. We're both passionate Lorca fans. We both think Chicago's overrated, much more like Gotham than New York is. We both hate the word paradox, which is used in practice to mean confusing by a speaker who seeks to justify his confusion by deeming the issue at hand as fundamentally impossible to understand. It was one of the best phone calls of my life. It was a romantic comedy, talk until the sun comes up, buy a plane ticket in the morning sort of phone call. And at the end of our conversation, the inevitable question came. Well, fantastic. It is really been a pleasure talking to you. I am sure you must feel the question all the time. But can I ask how you got your name? My mom is from the Yucatan. As if across the border, people are naming their children. Oh, and what does it mean? It means cherished. Oh, how beautiful. Ellen said this with a tone of great understanding, a tone you'd use after someone paused the movie to tell you why the guy in the gray suit was significant. And I'm not sure why this explanation was so satisfying to her, since fantastic means pretty something close to cherished in English, too. My mom actually is from the Yucatan, but she's also a public relations consultant with a pretty high-profile client list. And I felt sure that in one fell swoop, I trespassed against both my real mom, who was busy coaching powerful executives not to fidget while issuing difficult statements, and my new pretend mom, who was so profoundly smitten with American culture so as to name her children almost indiscriminately from a vocabulary she breathlessly lifted from infomercials. Ellen offered me the job, and I took it. And on Monday morning, I reported to the office early. I met my coworkers as they filed in, drinking strong coffees in a sunlit central studio. Mandy, herself a recent hire, volunteered to provide a dime tour. She had blunt-cut bangs and a nicotine patch and an easy laugh, and she talked and gestured with the pen in her right hand that she would absentmindedly ash every so often. And we were friends by the time she showed me how to work the copy machine in the break room. The tour ended at my desk, where someone had pitched a little paper name card. It said, "Fantastic Walker." The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Phones rang from far away. Lunch was one of the most flavorful meals I have ever eaten. And I knew why. It was my last meal as the arts editor of Harper's. Because at the end of the day, I would have to report to HR and present some ID. And I set into the final hours of my dream job with the joie de vivre of the nearly dead. The smell of toner, of electricity, of Mandy's afternoon cigarette, and the perfume she'd used to conceal it. All indelible. At 3, I pushed aside the employee handbook and traced my finger along the whorls in the cherry wood of my desk. How wonderful, I thought, to put cowlicks in trees, to spin a whirlpool into wood, and how wonderful to find the same design at the end of each of my fingertips. 10 perfect tiny hurricanes, each uniquely identifiable as mine. I wiped my fingerprints off the wood. I would, I decided, allow myself to simmer in 1 more hour of my dream job, and then I would march into her office and tell the simple truth. Ellen, I am not fantastic. I would not stutter. I would not fidget. I would thank her for the time at the magazine, tell her I cherished every moment, and resign. A couple more very brief ones. If there is a snowflake or Japanese scholar who knows how to say the name Nakaya better than I do, please wait until after the reading to correct me. Last night, in an observatory just outside of Moscow, they found the first snowflake known not to be unique. Its match fell some 18 years ago, on record as one of many in an early morning storm. The same radiating spires, the same lacy center, the same coquettish tumbling descent. Moscow phoned the find to London, and London to New York. And now 100,000 preschool teachers who must find another metaphor with which to discuss the many unsettling differences we observe between the members of our species. This news suggests that we are not crafted one by one, but die-cast in small batches. That we cannot be fairly called unique, although there are enough of us to sustain the illusion for just a little while. The old comfort of the strange idea that our imperfections were made bearable for the fact that they were ours alone has been removed from us, like a blanket from a sleeping child. The promise that each of us is somehow special is now weak coffee gone too cool to drink. We are not asked to account. If we are not precious by virtue of our inimitability, on what grounds do we regard ourselves so highly? How can I be assured that I am as important as my neighbor, and as my neighbor's boss? Worth and value are difficult to handle in the lab, light enough to be blown off the scale by a careless handler's exhale. But Moscow makes it look for all the world that we are now asked to earn what had seemed to be a birthright, that we must reestablish our merit daily, and daily risk its forfeit. There are 41 types of snowflakes, all named and sketched by the physicist Nakaya, after the death of his young first wife. Among them is the bullet rosette. These are the sort falling now, I think, and we will run for cover, or step out and take our chances. Who's got an uncanny sense of time? We're about 15, right? Nobody has an uncanny sense of time. Very canny senses of time. Okay, very briefly, this is another quick poem from Spiderbound. Life. Life is bad. But people are good. Regrettably, life is the only way to animate people. They are otherwise slack dolls, slumped over their desks, whose limbs must be stuffed through the holes in their clothing. Life is a clumsy instrument, a heavy key to wind a spring. Life is, also, and incidentally, the only good distraction from my impending death. On that... Thanks for listening. As I said before, it's perfectly correct that I know nobody really wants to go to a reading, but all of us readers, in our secret heart of secret hearts, secretly hope that you do want to be at just this one. So thanks for coming out. This is a really stellar turnout. Next up, we have John Jodzio.
Evening, everyone. I'm going to read 4 short pieces tonight. The first one is called My Codpiece Smells Like Soup. A few days ago, I was in my backyard rehearsing a play I'd written about my ex-girlfriend Daphne. I was wearing a codpiece and swinging around a bullwhip because there was a lot of codpiece wearing and bullwhipping in the script. I'd written a number of plays about Daphne in the last few months, but in my humble opinion, this one was the best. While I rehearsed, my neighbor Theo popped his head over my fence and asked me if he could borrow my codpiece. Theo was a playwright too. There are a lot of playwrights in my neighborhood, and sometimes cod pieces are very hard to come by.